Thanks for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio. This podcast was recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists in 2024 and 2025. In this episode, NCCAkron's Executive Artistic Director, Christy Bolingbroke, enters the studio with West Hollywood, California-based choreographer, writer, director, filmmaker, and performer, David Roussève. A Guggenheim Fellow and Bessie Award winner, Roussève has toured extensively domestically and internationally with his dance theater company, Reality. Roussève is a Distinguished Professor of Choreography in the Department of World Arts and Culture's Dance at UCLA. And, at the time of this recording, was developing his first full-length evening solo performance in over 20 years, tentatively titled Daddy AF.
Full disclosure to our listening friends, our relationship goes way back, and I am grateful to count David among the mentors during my collegiate dance experience. And I'm really curious, when did you know you wanted to be a choreographer?
I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be an artist. A performing artist. And my mother, Genevieve Roussève, who I just adore, was this real force of nature who grew up in the projects of Houston. Mm-hmm. Her family are Creoles from literally the back swamps of Louisiana, born in abject poverty, just faced incredible racism and misogyny in her life. And I mention that because in not an obnoxious way, and actually in a way I really appreciated, she was hell-bent on the fact that we were going to, if not be forced to do the things that she didn't have the chance to do, we were going to have the opportunity to choose to do those things. And so when the Alley Theater opened in Houston, and, the Alley Theater is now a huge regional, really important, but it's called the Alley Theater because it opened in a raggedy-ass space in an alley. The ceiling leaked. It was so ma and pa, but it was paradise. And my mom enrolled me in she always wanted to take acting class, but as a Black woman of color, she could not as a child. And so she offered me that opportunity, and I took to it like a duck takes to water. I knew right away I was just in heaven. So I was compelled from the earliest age to be a performer, but there was a clash, what I thought was maybe a not doable tension between my wanting to be on stage and sing and dance. And I took like jazz class, think bad jazz hands. That was my background, which I love. I'm not knocking bad jazz class.
But I'm like, did you go to the Swayze studio since you were in Houston?
Yes, I did go to the Swayze studio. And then I was, remember Astroworld? Our version of
yes,
Disneyland?
yes.
Well, I laughed. That was my first quote unquote dancing job.
Yes, you did.
Remember Marvel McFay? He was like their Mickey Mouse.
Okay.
This ridiculous guy in like a big orange hat with a big orange beard, and you wore this 100-pound costume. I was Marvel McFay. That was my celebrity as a child.
Oh my goodness.
Marvel McFay. Like Mickey
Deep
Mouse
cut.
minus 100 steps. But I was hooked nonetheless.
Amazing.
Having been a child of the 60s and the tumultuous civil rights years, and to make a very long story very short, my parents, the Roussèves, were always free people of color in New Orleans with phenomenal educational access. They were never slaves. However, they were Black. The Arsenaults were the poorest of the poor. Both of my grandparents were descended from slaves, and I grew up around them. And so I had a very strong social justice commitment and interest. And I saw how poorly my grandmother was treated. So I wanted to become a social justice lawyer to make sure that other people were not treated that way. The morals of the story, I mentioned that because I didn't understand how my desire to, be a Broadway hoofer and sing and dance and triple threat could gel with the desire to do something that was how I defined as socially responsible, because I do not dump my interests and opinions and desires on other people. For me, I wanted to do something that was going to affect society in general in a positive way. I'm getting to answer your question in such a roundabout way.
It's amazing.
But I got Princeton sent me an application. I had never heard of Princeton. I didn't know what a prep school was. I didn't know what an Ivy League. It was just, in fact, I was disappointed because I wanted to go to University of Texas with all my friends, and my mom thought this Princeton thing was such a big deal. So I returned the application and I got in and I went there. But that was vital to my becoming an artist, ironically, because at Princeton, I started studying modern dance and choreography and seeing a bigger choreographic and theatrical world. And I realized, OMG, you can be a performer and a creator of work. And if that's what you want to do, you can make it. You can try to move society. You can try to touch people. You can try to get people to see the other themselves in the other and the other in themselves through dance and theater. And so when I graduated from Princeton, I had a bigger context for what it might mean to be an artist. I got into Columbia and NYU law schools, but deferred for 3 years because I discovered in those 3 years the downtown alternative experimental dance community. And I knew that was what I wanted to do. So when I graduated from Princeton, I understood that I could be an artist and fulfill all of my seemingly conflicting desires. And when I met the downtown alternative community, I thought there was such freedom in this experimentation that they were doing that almost right away I knew this is what I want to be doing. I want to be an artist. I want to do socially responsive work, so work that's responding to the world in which we live. And I want to do it through alternative dance.
I mean, you got there. You are the embodiment of your family's history, as well as their hopes and dreams and possibilities, and a way to embody all of your interests. And I love the takeaway that to be an artist is a means of affecting change or representing a socially just and responsive world. As an artist that has spanned both the end of the 20th century and made work well into the 21st century, I'm really curious, how would you describe 21st century dance practices? How would you define it?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. I think we're in the realm of the unknown. I can tell you how I define it for me.
Yes.
Because the way that I would respond to that is I remember way back because when I first started making work, the kind of alternative New York dance community was very Eurocentric, AKA white.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember someone asked Bill T. Jones, well, what do you think a black dance is? And he said, well, any dance that a black choreographer wants to make, because there's such a range. And I would say that it's very personal now, what being like a contemporary and dance artist and what an idiom and what a language can be. I would say that for me, the things that were important for my development as an artist were that my training was highly eclectic, but I had a really easy time, for me, putting together the dots, meaning connecting up all these myriad. I thought they were all related, and it used to really bug me out, really bother me that people couldn't see. There was a huge tension then. And I'm hoping that being a 21st century dance practice means the tension is gone, that you can recognize and study all these divergent forms. I studied ballet, rigid Giacchetti technique with a guy named, a master named Alfredo Corvino. Very simple placement of the body. He really taught me how to dance through ballet. So to this day, when people say, aren't you opposed to classical training? I'm like, no. Oh, God, no. Good classical training. He taught me everything. I was also primarily focused on the Graham technique then. And I thought Graham's use of the back, use of spiral, is all contained in ballet and port de bras. The spiral, the épaulement is all based in organic spiraling of the body for me. And then I started studying contact improvisation, and it's all about spiral and connecting tail heel. And so for me, and jazz, it's all about these things. And once I started to connect those dots, I thought the thing that makes me a 21st century dance practitioner is the fact that I studied a diverse range of form, which I'm not saying that it made me the most diverse dance artist. It's not like I was adept at all those techniques. But what I realized was that the principles of movement that each one was conveying was contained in the other. The dance company model as I knew it in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s is no longer existent. And so I feel like it's an era, perhaps blessedly so, of individuality and finding out how to choreograph and work across forms, or at least have forms be accessible to a diverse body of dancers. I have dancers who come and work with me for a long, it takes me 5 years to make an evening length piece. So they commit to that, but they're also working with other people at the same time. I think it's an era of performers, blessedly for me, being adept at a wide range of form based on excavating the underlying kinetic principles that each form contains.
It makes tons of sense. I mean, one, as you were talking about your own training, where I found out some new things that I don't think I had known when I first took class from you. But two, hearing how you've processed it in your body. And I just remember those mornings, 9 a.m., starting on the floor.
Oh my gosh.
In a wide X, flexing and pressing the heels into the ground and being told to feel the sequence of the backs of our legs up to the spine, all the way out to the tips of our arms. And it's that awareness. It's that groundedness that you were not teaching us the Roussève technique. I think it was called something like release technique at that point, but that might just be branding and marketing speak. And then hearing how you reflect how it becomes a sort of groundedness, a way to move through your various interests. You've done work that is much more been rooted in jazz music, that it creates a strong groundedness to be able to stay attuned to the facility of your body as instrument without only limiting ourselves to single techniques. And so I've had some conversations with artists that often feel limited by when you have to tick off a genre on that grant application. And they're like, but I'm feeling expansive. Where's that box?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's also, I am definitely not afraid of crossing over to the commercial world. My students are always like, how am I going to make a living? And I'm like, well, you're in the Hollywood town. My hope for you is that, you bring some smarts to choreography for film and theater and get a gig once in a while that can pay you for a year and you can do your dance thing for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So even the professional, the commercial, the studio, the competition, I'm in favor of all of those worlds being converging and blending, and I feel like they are starting to.
Yeah, but it took a lot of time, I think, for people to kind of let go or be open to that, and that might be part of the benefit of social media that sort of changed the definition of what dance could be. But I want to come back to your creative process and ask, so where do you start? Do you have a consistent way that you usually begin a project, knowing it's a 5-year stretch?
Every time I finish, a large scale work, I'll just speak for myself. I'm always exhausted and thinking every single time, do I have another piece in me? Do I want to move forward? Because if you can stop, then stop. I remember someone said to me, don't do this unless you are so compelled. You can't stop yourself. Then do it. Give it everything you've got. And so every time I finish a piece, I feel like I take a little bit of a break and exhale and go, is this still satisfying my curiosity? I have to let a little bit of time go by, and the indulgence for me, the kind of self-focused part of being an artist is the beginning of a piece where I go, is there something that I feel so compelled to converse about right now that I have to make a piece about it? Or what is the thing that I cannot avoid that I'm insanely curious about right now? And if that issue doesn't show up, I just move on. But it always has. It's been sometimes political, sometimes social, sometimes personal, but there's always some driving force, series of questions, are usually around the human condition. I did a series around the word bittersweet and life as a series of colliding extremes. So once I get that philosophical underpinning of a work, because again, that's where I start, and props to other artists who do not start at that place, because that's very just personally how I start. And I used to always start with the writing. I would write the text and then go into the studio and figure out what the movement and the kinetic base of the piece is. And then about maybe 15 years ago, the whole thing switched, where I had an idea of the thematic underpinnings or the questions that I was asking through the piece, no idea how to approach them. And I started realizing about 20 years ago, actually, because it's been a long time, that the movement was simply not as strong as the text. And I thought, don't write the text, just start with the movement. So now, of late, I have been starting with the movement and writing the text based on what the movement and the kinetic base of the piece is. Whereas in the early days, I would always write the text, and that would tell me how to approach things kinetically. And they reverse. Now I go into the studio first to start to excavate a movement vocabulary. And then that tells me what the text wants to be around the thematic focus of the piece.
It's interesting to notice how that has changed or informed over time, because I would definitely consider, I think, one of your specific choreographic points of view is that balance between text and movement, which has also been part of your background in theater and in dance and your strength as a writer, which is not something that everyone chooses to do or can do as well, too, because was it Joe Good says, like, everyone knows dancing and talking cancel each other out. So that's exactly an interesting tension to navigate,
that's
too.
That's a really interesting tension. Yeah. Yeah. I'm constantly also telling my students, because dancing and speaking, maybe it's not as wildly popular as it was, but it at one point it was, and you could make a piece without. And I just kept saying, as a speaking, moving artist, you might not need to speak and move.
Yeah.
If I could say what you could say through pure movement, maybe I wouldn't be speaking either. Like, you have to go with what your heart and your idiom is. I remember Simone Forti gave a speaking lecture, a dancing lecture, where she said she's really in love with the specificity of language, because language can be specific in ways that movement cannot. And I agree with that 100%. But she's in love with the metaphor and the poetry of dance. And I thought, oh my gosh, bingo, yes. If I want to speak on specific social issues, for example, movement, it would be demeaning to dance. I'd have to pantomime those issues out, which is just not my focus. There's nothing wrong with mime. I love a good mime. But for me, I also can't make a language narrative go as deeply as I can make a movement metaphor go. And so it's about combining abstract, metaphor-based movement with the specifics of narrative and language. And so those two things, movement and dance, are bringing something separate to the table. One is speaking literally and one is speaking metaphorically.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who does value language, how do you name a dance? Do you have a certain practice or moment in your process where that surfaces itself?
It used to be that my titles were all really long, and they were usually a line from the text. So the first piece I did in Los Angeles on tour was called Had Me Somebody, But I Lost Her Very Young, which was a line from the text. And all of them were about that length.
You're killing the character count.
Yeah. I think Colored Children Flying By, which was also a line from the text. That was probably my shortest. And I have to say, my first gig at BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and Joe Melillo was the artistic director then, came really, really early in my career. It was ridiculous. Oh my God, it was ridiculous how early that came, but I'm very grateful. But Joe rightfully was like, this guy needs mentorship, because there were a couple of really famous cases, and I would not be mean enough to mention their names, of people who got a BAM gig super early and it just destroyed their careers because they weren't ready. And I mention that because Joe said to me, I was making my first piece, and it was about my grandmother, who was a Creole woman, and juxtaposing her life stories from the early 1900s with my life stories from, AIDS-ravaged New York of the early 1990s. And I don't remember the title. It was some long, I loved it, poetic title. And he was like, no. And I was like, what? How can a presenter tell me what's the title? He was like, no, you cannot come to BAM with a paragraph-long title of a piece. So we settled on Urban Scenes / Creole Dreams. And I was like, oh, that is what the piece is. It's Urban Scenes, my Urban Scenes, and Creole Dreams. And that changed the way that I titled my work. And I started looking for something somewhat poetic, but that succinctly captured something about the piece. But the current piece I'm working on is called Daddy AF. And I have to say, it's a solo for myself, my first solo in 25 years, evening length. But there was a monologue in it where I talked about becoming, after I got divorced from my first husband, Daddy AF. And it was going to be a funny monologue about discovering like dating apps, hookup apps, and the hashtag on Instagram, how my likes just quadrupled when I would tag Daddy AF. So I learned really quickly that that monologue got cut.
Oh.
And so I just love the title so much that my husband tells me every day, you need to change the title. It doesn't have anything to do with Daddy AF anymore. But I love the title so much that in my mind, it's like, no, I'm making a piece about Daddy F becomes a symbol or a metaphor. It no longer is a narrative literal. And so I just really loved the title. And I thought I was going to call it hashtag Daddy AF, but a manager suggested to me, you don't really need the hashtag, which I don't. Yeah, so it has evolved. It used to be these long poetic in my opinion, poetic. I'm sure other people were like, oh my God.
Well, only
It's
the
like
copy editors for the playbills were like, oh my God.
That's right. That's right. And Joe Melillo. But I was grateful because he was absolutely right.
Well,
he was like, you are not in a downtown alternative space. You're going to be touring this piece. Just no, you can't do it. But I was pissed. I was like, you can't tell me what to call my piece.
Sure, in that moment. But what I'm hearing, the lesson learned is around editing, whether it's self-editing.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
And because I know you've both have a writing practice, a dance making practice, and over the years have also made films. I'm curious how you might reflect on editing as a creative tool, and how is it the same or different across these varied mediums that have a different relationship to time too?
Filmmaking transformed my editing across all genres and forms. It transformed how I use language and voiceover in particular, and also how I edit. The first film that I made was for a PBS series called Alive from Off Center, and then Alive TV, and they paired up a filmmaker with a director, and the director edited the film. And I watched her, Ayoka Chinzero, who I adore, edit this film. In the old days when you had to splice, there was nothing digital. When I started directing my own film and working with an editor, something about sitting in front of that digital editing equipment, Final Cut, and not having dancers in the studio with me because it's so painful to cut someone solo or edit it down, and they're in the studio, or I have to face them the next day and go, your pivotal moment is cut. And I just it's very clear. It became very clear to me when there were no emotions attached to it, including my own sequences on film. It was very clear when something was superfluous. And so it was through film and looking at that, I recognized, oh my gosh, that doesn't absolutely need to be there. And then making my film 2 Seconds After Laughter, which was a collaboration with Carrie Ann Shimsham and Sri Susilowati, who's an Indonesian dancer, choreographer, performer. And Carrie Ann is she shot and edited, and I wrote, choreographed, and directed this film. And I remember that we were starting to submit it to festivals, and Carrie Ann knew the director of a couple of festivals, and they watched it, and it was 30 minutes long, and they said, love it. It's a really strong piece of work. However, if you don't get this down to 15 minutes, it's not going to screen. Two of them said, both of them, one 30-minute piece means I can't curate two 15-minute pieces, means I can't curate three 10-minute pieces, which means I can't curate, 6 5-minute pieces. So I factor that in. It's knocking other pieces out of the running. And I remember one of them said, do you want it to screen or not? And if you do, you should get it down to 15 minutes. And honestly, I think it's a stronger work at 30 minutes. But we went back in and it taught me a brand new lesson. Even when you think things are vital, they usually aren't. Some neutral voice who sees this film won't know what you cut out. And so that's been my motto. I thought my work is usually too long. I think it was Doris Humphrey who said oh my God, I hope I'm not misquoting, who said every dance is too long. I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. All of my dances are too long. So it was through film and something about it being an exclusively visual medium that allowed me to see the connections that weren't there and how perhaps scenes and episodes and dances were existing on their own and did not need that extra 5 minutes of narrative context. So it really transformed how I feel about editing. That having been said, I'm having a terrible time editing my solo. Terrible. But when I go into a theater in this day and age and I see in the program 45 minutes with no intermission, I'm like, hallelujah, I'm going to love this. So I try to keep that in mind. Like, my attention span is basically nil these days. Yeah. And I'm satisfied, sometimes satiated with, a 50-minute, an hour piece. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying my best to get it down.
In this making of a creative life, as full and as long as it has been, is there a piece of advice that you haven't named yet that you've received, or something else in particular that you would like to pass on, maybe that you shared with students, or you could make it up on the spot right now?
Yeah, I would say there are probably two things that I am going to make up on the spot.
Excellent.
The first is so important. And I know it's so simple, and I know we hear it all the time, but it's be you. Christy, everything has been done already. Everything except one. You. Like, that's what I'm constantly like, no, you don't have to be Trisha Brown derivative, or you don't have to be like adore Trisha Brown. You don't have my favorite choreographer on the planet who rocked my world, Pina Bausch. You don't have to emulate Pina Bausch. She's been done 1,000 times, and no one can do it better than Pina. No one has done you, though. What is your aesthetic? What is your awkward or graceful or virtuosic or pedestrian way of moving? Yeah. That's the only thing that a choreographer can do that has never been done, and it's them. It's being authentic. No one has done you. So that's what I constantly tell them. If you want to have a great commercial career, bring something original. And the only thing original we have is ourselves. I have an original movement language, and you see that all the time. It takes off when people go, whoa, I've never seen that before.
Yeah. I mean, Paris Goebel is blowing up, right? And yet works for so many different commercial musicians and artists, but people are drawn to it because, what she does for Lady Gaga is not what she does for Rihanna. It's just different enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second piece of advice I would give them, which may sound a little bit pretentious, but this is my own personal stance, not only given the time we are in, but any time. The arts, along with our cousin, the humanities, are what is needed to literally save the world. And that has never, ever been truer than the current time in which we live, allowing people through a humane, heartfelt dialogue to either see themselves in the other on stage through movement or to see beauty. I love a good, beautiful ballet. I love seeing beauty. I love seeing agony. I love seeing tension. But the arts are what allow us to better ourselves as human beings and to connect with each other. And I personally would say to every choreographer, why are you doing this? You have to be convicted on your own terms. But my terms are only the arts and the humanities can save the world. Everything else has failed. I am alive today because of STEM and medical advancements that has saved my life. But the thing that gives me a better life is the arts and the humanities. And without those, I would not want to be on the planet. So my main advice is to be really aware of why you're doing what you're doing, knowing that it is the most important thing that a human being can do at this present time. It's the only way we will save ourselves in this current moment, is through the type of compassion that the arts can further. So yeah, I would say know that you're part of a movement that is saving the world and be aware of what your role is in that movement.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for the work that you have done in that movement that has shaped so many people's perspectives and being the people that we are in this space. And also that reminder, what you're talking about, NCCAkron as a National Center for Choreography. We certainly are here for new work to get made, but we're also here advocating for dance and the creative process as essential parts of culture in this country, because it is the tools that we need to process the world that we live in and to move it forward.
Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is produced by NCCAkron and supported in part by the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts, and Audio-Technica, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. Our podcast program is produced by Lisa Niedermeyer of Handmade Future Studio. Rahsaan Cruz is our audio engineer, with transcription by Arushi Singh, theme music by Flaco Torres, and cover art by Micah Kraus. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Sarah Durham, Christy Welter, Nikisha Moore-Dunson, and Dante Fields. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.